He wore a custom Brioni suit worth more than her entire life's earnings, and he had a gun tucked into his waistband that could end it in a second. Johnny Thorne wasn't just a businessman. He was the king of New York's underworld, disguised as a venture capitalist. But on a rainy Tuesday in Manhattan, he made a mistake. He thought the girl pouring his whiskey was just part of the furniture. He thought he could mock her intelligence with a sarcastic question about high-stakes finance. He didn't know that Eliza Rossi wasn't just a waitress. She was a prodigy, waiting for a break. And when she opened her mouth to answer him, she didn't just change his portfolio. She signed her own death warrant. This is the story of the dangerous romance that brought an empire to its knees. The rain in New York City didn't wash away the grime. It just made the neon lights of the financial district reflect sharper on the wet pavement. Inside the Obsidian Room, an ultra-exclusive lounge tucked away on 57th Street, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of Cuban cigars, aged mahogany, and old money. Eliza Rossi tightened her apron, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't the cold. It was the man at table 4. Johnny Thorne. Everyone in the city knew the name, but only a select few knew the truth. To the public, he was the CEO of Thorne Capital, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed assets. To the staff of the Obsidian Room, he was the best tipper and the most terrifying patron. Rumors swirled that the distressed assets he acquired were usually companies owned by people who had crossed the wrong family. Eliza, table 4 needs a refill. McAllen 25. Neat. The floor manager, a nervous man named Arthur, hissed at her. And for God's sake, don't look at the papers on the table. Eliza nodded, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. She picked up the heavy crystal decanter and made her way across the plush velvet carpet. Johnny was sitting alone, which was rare. Usually, he was flanked by his head of security, a hulking man named Silas, or his slick attorney, Martin Vane. Tonight he was solitary, his jacket draped over the chair, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked exhausted. A stack of documents was spread out before him, filled with rows of numbers, red ink, and complex amortization schedules. Eliza approached silently. She poured the amber liquid with the precision of a surgeon, ensuring not a drop splashed onto the table. Johnny didn't look up. He was rubbing his temples, staring at a spreadsheet that seemed to be causing him a migraine. He muttered a curse under his breath. Useless. All of them. Eliza stepped back, intending to leave, but her eyes caught the document. It was a balance sheet for a shipping logistics company based in Rotterdam. She shouldn't have looked. She knew the rules. But before her life had fallen apart, before her father's gambling debts forced her to drop out of Wharton and pick up double shifts here, Eliza had been top of her class in forensic accounting. Numbers spoke to her in a language she understood better than English. She saw the error instantly. It was glaring, a deliberate miscalculation in the EBITDA margin intended to hide a massive cash bleed. Johnny slammed his pen down. He finally looked up, his eyes the color of cold steel. He caught her staring. "See something you like?" His voice was a low rumble, dangerous and mocking. Eliza froze. I apologize, Mr. Thorne. You were just reading private documents," Johnny interrupted, leaning back and swirling his whiskey. A cruel smirk played on his lips. He was bored, frustrated, and looking for a target. "Tell me, sweetheart, since you're so interested in high-level logistics, what's your professional opinion? Should I liquidate the asset or restructure the debt?" It was a joke, a taunt. He expected her to stammer, to blush, to run away. He expected her to be nothing more than the scenery. Eliza gripped the empty tray against her chest. She looked at his face, handsome, sharp, and utterly arrogant. Something inside her snapped. She was tired of being invisible. She was tired of being poor. "You shouldn't do either," Eliza said, her voice steady. Johnny paused, the glass halfway to his mouth. He blinked, genuinely surprised she had spoken at all. "Excuse me?" "The Rotterdam Logistics Company," Eliza said, pointing a slender finger at the paper, careful not to touch it. "You're looking at the operational costs, thinking they're bloated due to fuel prices. But if you look at the currency conversion rates used in column D, they're fixed at last year's average, not the current spot rate. Someone is skimming the exchange difference. The company isn't failing, it's being bled dry by the CFO. If you restructure, the skimming continues. If you liquidate, you lose the underlying value." Silence descended on table 4. It was heavy, suffocating. Johnny slowly set his glass down. The amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a razor-sharp intensity. He looked at the paper, pulled a gold-plated calculator from his pocket, and punched in a few numbers. He stopped. He punched in a few more. His jaw tightened. He looked up at Eliza, really seeing her for the first time. He took in the frayed collar of her uniform, the weary shadows under her intelligent hazel eyes, the way she held herself with dignity despite her station. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice devoid of the earlier mockery. "Just the waitress, sir," Eliza whispered, realizing she might have just made a fatal error. "You don't correct a Mafia boss. Enjoy your drink." She turned and walked away as fast as she could without running, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She hid in the break room for the rest of her shift, praying he would leave. When she finally emerged an hour later, table 4 was empty. The papers were gone. But sitting on top of the bill was a tip. It wasn't cash. It was a business card, Thorn Capital. On the back, in sharp, angular handwriting, were 3 words: "Be ready at 9 a.m. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She sat in her cramped studio apartment in Queens, staring at the business card. The sensible part of her brain, the part that kept her alive this long, screamed at her to run. Johnny Thorn was dangerous. Rumors linked him to the disappearance of a union leader last year and the sudden accidental fire that burned down a rival casino in Atlantic City. But then she looked at the stack of overdue medical bills for her mother's care facility. She looked at the eviction notice taped to her fridge. She had $42 in her bank account. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. At 8:55 a.m., Eliza stood in front of the monolithic glass tower of Thorn Capital in Midtown Manhattan. She wore her only suit, a charcoal grey one she'd bought for interviews 3 years ago. It was slightly tight now, but it was clean. She barely made it to the reception desk before a man stepped into her path. It was Silas, the bodyguard. He was a mountain of muscle in a suit that struggled to contain him. "Miss Rossi," Silas grunted. He didn't ask. He stated, "He's expecting you." Eliza was escorted past security, past the bustling floor of analysts who looked at her with curiosity, and into the private elevator. The ride to the 40th floor was silent. When the doors opened, she stepped into an office that was larger than her entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Johnny Thorn stood by the window, his back to her, talking on a phone. "Handle it, Martin. If the CFO in Rotterdam tries to run, break his legs. No, wait. Freeze his assets first. Then break his legs." Eliza swallowed hard. Johnny hung up and turned around. In the daylight, he was even more intimidating. He wore a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. His dark hair was perfectly styled, but his eyes were predatory. "You were right," he said without preamble. I was?" Eliza managed. The CFO was skimming off the exchange rates, about 4 million euros over the last 18 months. My analysts missed it. My high-priced Oxford-educated idiots missed it. You caught it in 10 seconds while pouring scotch. He walked toward her, closing the distance until he was standing just a foot away. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood and cold rain. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a leather chair opposite his massive ebony desk. Eliza sat. "Mr. Thorne, I didn't mean to overstep last night. I just—" "Stop," he said, holding up a hand. He sat on the edge of his desk, looking down at her. "I ran a background check on you this morning, Eliza. It's a tragic read. Full scholarship to Wharton, Dean's List, on track for Wall Street. Then your father, Carlo Rossi, gets into debt with the wrong loan sharks, gambles away the house. You drop out to work 3 jobs to pay for your mother's dementia care." Eliza felt a cold flush of shame and anger. "That is none of your business." "It is now," Johnny said calmly. He slid a folder across the desk. "Open it." Eliza hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a bank transfer confirmation. "I bought your father's debt," Johnny said casually, as if discussing the weather. "All of it. The principal, the interest, the penalties. You don't owe the loan sharks anymore, Eliza. You owe me." Eliza jumped to her feet, the paper trembling in her hand. You can't do that. I didn't ask you to do that. You saved me 4 million euros last night. Consider this a down payment." Johnny stood up and walked around the desk, boxing her in. "Here is the deal. You have a gift, a mind for patterns and numbers that I haven't seen in a decade. I have a business that requires creative accounting. Legitimate firms ask too many questions. You won't. You want me to launder money for you?" Eliza accused, her voice shaking. "I want you to manage my private equity portfolio. Find the leaks, fix the inefficiencies, make me richer." His eyes darkened. "And yes, clean the books where they need cleaning. And if I refuse?" Johnny leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "Then you owe me $200,000, payable immediately. Can you pay that, Ms. Rossi?" Eliza stared at him. He had trapdoored her. He had orchestrated this entire scenario in the span of 12 hours. She looked at the man who held her life in his hands. He was a monster, but he was offering her a lifeline wrapped in barbed wire. "What is the salary?" she asked, her voice hard. Johnny smiled, and for a second it wasn't cruel. It was impressed. 20,000 a month, plus bonuses, and I cover your mother's medical bills at a private facility. Top tier." Eliza's breath hitched. That kind of money would change everything. It would save her mother. It would give her a life back. But the cost was her soul. "I have conditions," she said, lifting her chin. Johnny raised an eyebrow. "You're in no position to negotiate, little bird. If I'm handling your money, I need full access. No hidden ledgers, no locked files. If I'm going to protect your assets, I need to see the whole board. And—" She paused. "I don't deal with the violence. I don't want to know who gets their legs broken. I just handle the numbers." Johnny studied her for a long moment. The tension in the room was electric. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had made her speak up at the bar. He liked it. He liked it too much. "Agreed," Johnny said. He extended his hand. Eliza looked at his hand, large, powerful, capable of violence and generosity in equal measure. She took it. His grip was warm and firm. "Welcome to Thorne Capital, Eliza," he said softly. Just then, the heavy oak doors banged open. A man strode in, sleek, blonde, wearing a suit that was too shiny. It was Martin Vane, Johnny's attorney and second-in-command. He stopped dead when he saw Eliza. "Johnny," Martin said, his voice dripping with suspicion. "Who is the girl?" "This is our new senior financial analyst, Johnny said, not letting go of Eliza's hand. Martin narrowed his eyes, looking Eliza up and down with a mix of lust and disdain. A woman? For the inner circle. Johnny, you know the protocols. Is she vetted? I vetted her, Johnny said coldly. She stays. Martin forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Whatever you say, boss. As Martin turned to leave, Eliza felt a knot of dread in her stomach. She had seen that look before. Martin Vane didn't just look like a lawyer. He looked like a viper waiting to strike. Johnny released her hand. Get to work, Eliza. Your office is next to mine. Do not disappoint me. As Eliza sat at her new desk, surrounded by monitors and high-tech equipment, she realized the truth. She wasn't just an employee. She was a prize Johnny had claimed. And in the world of the Mafia, prizes were often stolen, broken, or killed over. She opened the first digital file, labeled Project Hydra. As the numbers filled the screen, she gasped. It wasn't just money laundering. It was a map of bribes paid to judges, senators, and police captains across New York. She wasn't just managing money. She was holding the keys to the city, and she had a feeling that Martin Vane wanted those keys back, no matter the cost. 3 weeks into her new life at Thorn Capital, Eliza Rossi had become a ghost. She arrived before the sun rose, and left long after the cleaners had vacuumed the plush carpets. The salary Johnny promised was real. The first deposit had cleared her mother's debts instantly, but the cost was isolation. She was drowning in numbers. Johnny hadn't lied. The company was a labyrinth. It was a brilliant, terrifying maze of shell companies, offshore trusts, and legitimate front businesses ranging from construction firms in Jersey to art galleries in Soho. But something was wrong. It was 11:30 p.m. on a stormy Thursday. The office was empty, save for the hum of the servers and the rhythmic drumming of rain against the 40th floor windows. Eliza was staring at a specific ledger for Project Hydra. You're still here? Eliza jumped, spilling lukewarm coffee onto her desk. Johnny was leaning against the doorframe of her office. He had discarded his jacket and tie hours ago, his white shirt unbuttoned to reveal the hint of a tattoo on his chest. He looked tired, but his eyes were alert, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. I found something, Eliza said, her voice raspy from disuse. Johnny walked in, the heavy scent of scotch and tobacco clinging to him. He pulled a chair up next to hers, too close. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. Show me, he murmured. Here, Eliza pointed at the screen, tracing a line of transactions. You have a recurring payment to a consulting firm called Argent Solutions for risk assessment. It's billed monthly at $150,000. It looks standard. It is, Johnny said, frowning. Martin set that up. They handle our darker liabilities. Clean-up crews. Bribes. That's what the invoices say, Eliza corrected. But look at the routing numbers. The money goes to a bank in the Caymans, sits for exactly 24 hours, and then is wired back into the US. Laundering, Johnny stated. That's the point. No. Eliza turned to face him, her knee brushing against his thigh. She ignored the jolt of electricity that shot through her. When it comes back, it doesn't go into the firm's holding accounts. It goes into a blind trust called Veritas. And guess what Veritas just bought last week? Johnny's eyes narrowed. Tell me. A penthouse in Monaco, and a 70-foot yacht named the Sea Witch. Johnny went still. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. You're telling me someone is stealing my clean money to buy themselves retirement toys? I'm telling you that Argent Solutions is a hole in your pocket, Eliza whispered. Someone is siphoning off about $2 million a year, and whoever signed off on these invoices knew exactly how to hide it from the auditors. They used a double-entry mirroring technique that only works if you control both the sender and the receiver. Johnny stood up slowly. He walked to the window, staring out at the blurred lights of Manhattan. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. "Martin," Johnny said, the name leaving his lips like a curse. "He's the only one with signature authority on the Cayman accounts," Eliza confirmed softly. Johnny didn't turn around. "Martin and I grew up together. We were in the same foster home. I taught him how to tie a tie. He took a bullet for me in '09. Eliza saw the pain in his posture. Even monsters had hearts, and his was breaking. She stood up and walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. "Money changes people, Johnny. Or maybe he feels he's owed. For the bullet." Johnny turned. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes were vulnerable. "And what about you, Eliza? I bought your debt. Do you feel I own you?" "You pay me for a job," she said, holding his gaze. "I do the job. But I'm not Martin. I don't bite the hand that feeds me." Johnny stepped closer. He reached out, his rough thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Eliza's breath hitched. The air between them was suddenly thick, heavy with unsaid things. He was dangerous, a killer, a criminal kingpin, and she was the waitress who knew his secrets. "You're too smart for your own good," he whispered. "You found in 3 weeks what he hid for 3 years. You realize this puts a target on your back?" "I can handle myself," Eliza lied. "No, you can't," Johnny said. His hand moved to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. "Martin is a viper. If he knows you know." "Then don't let him know," she breathed. Johnny looked at her lips. For a second, she thought he was going to kiss her. She wanted him to. The adrenaline of the discovery mixed with the fear of the man was a potent cocktail. Instead, he pulled back, his mask sliding back into place. "We have to be sure," Johnny said, his voice hardening. "Tomorrow night is the Vanderbilt Charity Gala. It's the biggest social event of the season. Everyone will be there. Senators, judges, and Martin. So, while Martin is busy shaking hands and playing the loyal lieutenant, you and I are going to trigger a digital audit from the server room. But I need his physical keycard to override the lockout. He keeps it in his jacket pocket." Eliza's eyes widened. "You want me to pickpocket the mob's lawyer?" "I want you to distract him," Johnny smirked, a dark, wicked glint returning to his eyes. "You're going to be my date, Eliza, and you're going to be the most stunning woman in the room. He won't be looking at his pockets. He'll be looking at you." The Vanderbilt Gala was held at the Plaza Hotel. It was a sea of black tuxedos, glittering diamonds, and fake smiles. The ballroom smelled of expensive perfume and deceit. Eliza felt like an imposter, but she didn't look like one. Johnny had sent a team to her apartment that morning. Hair, makeup, and a dress. The dress was a weapon. Blood-red silk that clung to her curves like a second skin, with a slit that went up to her thigh and a back that plunged dangerously low. When she had stepped out of the limousine, the paparazzi cameras flashed like lightning. Johnny took her arm, guiding her through the chaos. He wore a tuxedo that made him look like James Bond's darker, deadlier brother. "Breathe," Johnny whispered in her ear as they entered the ballroom. "You look magnificent. Just stay close to me." "I feel naked," she hissed back. "Good, that's the point. Disarm them." They moved through the crowd. Johnny introduced her to a Senator Reynolds, a real name, a real power player in New York politics. The senator kissed her hand and looked at Johnny with knowing eyes. "New associate, Johnny, or something more?" "Essential personnel," Johnny replied smoothly. Across the room, Eliza saw him. Martin Vane. He was holding court with a group of investors, laughing loudly. But his eyes tracked them. He saw the red dress. He saw Johnny's hand on the small of her back. His smile faltered. "He's watching," Eliza whispered. "I know," Johnny said. "Go to the bar. Order a drink. Look bored. He won't be able to resist approaching you." Eliza nodded and detached herself from Johnny. She walked to the bar, feeling 100 pairs of eyes on her. She ordered a sparkling water. "A little out of your depth, aren't you, Cinderella?" The voice was silk over gravel. Martin slid next to her. Up close, he smelled of excessive cologne and mint. "Mr. Vane," Eliza said coolly, "I'm just enjoying the view." "The view looks expensive," Martin sneered, gesturing to her dress. "Johnny certainly spends a lot on his pets." Eliza turned to face him, suppressing the urge to throw her drink in his face. "I manage the portfolio, Martin. I earned my place. Did you earn yours? Or are you just the guy who carries the bags?" Martin's face contorted. He stepped into a personal space, his voice dropping to a menacing hiss. "Listen to me, you little accountant. I know you've been digging in the files. Project Hydra, Argent Solutions. You think you're clever?" Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. He knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Don't lie to me." Martin grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "I checked the access logs. You flagged the Cayman transfers. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to Johnny, and you're going to tell him you made a mistake. You're going to tell him the numbers are clean. If you don't—" He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "Your mother is in the Greenwood Care Facility, right? Room 304. It would be a shame if the fire alarm system malfunctioned tonight. Old buildings, they burn so fast." Eliza's blood turned to ice. She couldn't breathe. He was threatening to burn her mother alive. "Let go of her." The voice was low, but it cut through the noise of the party like a gunshot. Johnny was standing behind Martin. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely, terrifyingly void of emotion. Martin released her arm, smoothing his jacket. "Just getting to know the new talent, boss." "Get the car," Johnny said to Martin. "We're leaving." "But the auction hasn't—" "Now, Martin." Martin glared at Eliza, a look that promised death, and stormed off towards the exit. Johnny turned to Eliza. He saw the red marks on her arm. His jaw clenched so hard, a muscle feathered in his cheek. "What did he say?" "He knows," Eliza whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "He knows I saw the transfers. He threatened my mother, Johnny. He said he'd burn down the facility." Johnny's face went pale. He crossed the line. "We have to go. I have to get my mother out," Eliza panicked. "Silas is already there," Johnny said quickly, gripping her shoulders. "I sent him an hour ago. I anticipated Martin might try to use leverage. Your mother is safe. She's being moved to a private safe house in upstate as we speak." Eliza collapsed against him, relief washing over her. "You knew?" "I suspected. I never leave loose ends." Suddenly the music stopped. The heavy double doors of the ballroom burst open. "Federal agents! Nobody move!" A swarm of FBI agents in tactical gear poured into the room, rifles raised. The crowd screamed. Chaos erupted. Glass shattered. "It's a raid," Johnny growled. He grabbed Eliza's hand. "Martin, he didn't just steal from me. He sold me out." "How do we get out?" Eliza cried, as people stampeded around them. "The kitchen," Johnny said, pulling her through the terrified crowd. "Move!" They sprinted through the panicked mob. Johnny shoved a waiter aside, kicking open the service doors. They burst into the steamy, noisy kitchen. "This way!" Johnny led her past startled chefs towards the loading dock. But as they reached the rear exit, the door swung open. Martin stood there. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by two men who weren't FBI. They were Russian mercenaries. And he was holding a gun. "Going somewhere, Johnny?" Martin smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had waited a lifetime for this moment. "You rat," Johnny spat. "You gave them the books." "I gave them dummy books that implicate you in domestic terrorism," Martin laughed. "By tomorrow you'll be the most wanted man in America, and I'll be running the empire." He pointed the gun at Johnny's chest. "But first, I have to tie up the loose ends." He shifted the aim toward Eliza. "No!" Johnny lunged. Bang! The sound was deafening in the tiled room. Eliza screamed. Johnny staggered back, clutching his side. Blood blossomed on his white shirt, stark and bright. But Johnny didn't fall. He roared, a primal sound of rage, and tackled Martin. The gun skittered across the floor. The two mercenaries moved in, but Johnny was a man possessed. He broke the nose of the first one with a sickening crunch and threw the second into a stack of metal trays. "Eliza, run!" Johnny shouted, grappling with Martin on the greasy floor. Eliza looked at the gun. It was lying near a crate of vegetables. She looked at the exit. She could run. She could survive. Then she looked at Johnny. He was bleeding, fighting for his life, fighting for her. She didn't run. Eliza dove for the gun. Her hands shook as she gripped the cold metal. She had never fired a weapon in her life. One of the mercenaries recovered and pulled a knife, charging at her. "Hey!" she screamed. The mercenary hesitated. Eliza squeezed the trigger. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The bullet went wild, hitting a steam pipe. Hot steam blasted into the room, creating a wall of white fog. "Come on!" Johnny appeared out of the mist, grabbing her arm. He was limping, his hand pressed to his bleeding side. They burst out of the loading dock into the cool night air of the alleyway. A black SUV screeched to a halt in front of them. The window rolled down. It was Silas. "Get in!" They dove into the back seat. Silas floored it, tires smoking as they peeled away just as the FBI agents burst out of the back door. Eliza ripped the hem of her expensive dress, pressing the silk against Johnny's wound. "You're shot," she sobbed. Johnny looked at her, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He let out a weak, pained laugh. "You stayed," he wheezed. "You crazy girl. You could have run." "You own my debt, remember?" Eliza said, pressing harder on the wound, her hands covered in his blood. "I can't pay you back if you're dead." Johnny reached up, his bloody hand cupping her cheek. I think the interest rates just went up." His eyes rolled back, and he slumped against her. "Johnny!" Eliza screamed. "Silas, drive faster!" The city lights blurred past them as they sped into the darkness, leaving their old lives behind. The King of New York was fallen, and the Waitress was now the only thing standing between him and the grave. The SUV tore through the heavy iron gates of a property deep in the Catskills. It was pitch black, the rain turning into a sleet that slashed against the windshield. The safe house wasn't a cabin. It was a modernist structure of concrete and glass, cantilevered over a rushing river. It looked like a fortress built for a villain or a ghost. "Help me get him inside," Silas barked, parking the car near the entrance. Eliza's hands were slick with blood. Johnny was conscious but fading fast. His face was grey, his breathing shallow and ragged. Together, she and Silas hauled Johnny's dead weight out of the car. He groaned, a sound of pure agony that tore through Eliza's heart. They dragged him into the main living area, laying him on a white leather sofa that immediately stained red. "I need the med kit," Silas commanded. "Kitchen, under the sink. Go!" Eliza scrambled, slipping on the polished concrete floor. She found the kit, a heavy, tactical orange box, and sprinted back. Silas was cutting open Johnny's shirt, revealing the angry, puckered wound just above his hip bone. "The bullet is still in there," Silas grunted, pressing a towel hard against the hole. "I have to secure the perimeter. We might have been followed. You have to get it out." Eliza froze. "Me?" "No. No, Silas, I'm an accountant. I can't—" "I'm the only one who can handle a rifle if they come through that gate," Silas said, his eyes hard. "He trusts you. Do it." Silas shoved a bottle of vodka and a pair of surgical forceps into her hands, then turned and marched out into the storm, locking the heavy door behind him. Eliza was alone with the King of New York, who was currently bleeding to death on a designer couch. "Eliza," Johnny whispered. His eyes were half open, unfocused. "I'm here," she said, her voice trembling. She popped the cap off the vodka and poured it over her hands, then over the forceps. She poured the rest over the wound. Johnny hissed, his back arching off the sofa. "Mother of—" I'm sorry, Eliza cried. "Silas said the bullet is inside. I have to find it." Johnny reached out and gripped her wrist. His hand was weak, but his gaze locked onto hers with sudden clarity. "Don't look at the blood. Look at the problem. It's just an inefficiency. Remove it." He was coaching her. Even dying, he was trying to make her strong. Eliza took a deep breath. She compartmentalized the horror. She imagined the wound was a balance sheet, and the bullet was a red ink error that needed to be expunged. "Hold still," she whispered. She went in. The next 10 minutes were a blur of horror. Johnny didn't scream, but he made sounds that Eliza would never forget. Low, guttural grunts of suppressed pain. The metal clicked against something hard. "I got it," she gasped. With a sickening squelch, she pulled the bullet out and dropped it into a metal bowl. Blood welled up, fresh and dark. "Pressure," she muttered to herself. She packed the wound with gauze and began to stitch it closed, her fingers moving with the same dexterity she used on a keyboard. When she tied the final knot, she slumped back, exhausted. Johnny had passed out from the pain. Eliza didn't sleep. She sat on the floor beside the couch, watching his chest rise and fall, holding the gun she had taken from the kitchen. She washed the blood from her hands, but she could still smell it. Morning broke with a cold, grey light. The rain had stopped. Eliza walked to the massive window. The property was surrounded by dense forest. Down by the gate, she saw Silas standing like a statue, rifle in hand. "Water!" a voice croaked behind her. Eliza turned. Johnny was awake. He was pale, and he looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. But he was alive. She rushed to the kitchen, filling a glass, and brought it to him. He drank greedily, then tried to sit up. "Don't," she scolded, pushing him back gently. "You'll rip the stitches." Johnny looked down at his side. "Neat work. Better than some field medics I've known." "I imagined it was Martin's face," Eliza said dryly. Johnny let out a short, rough laugh that turned into a cough. He reached out and took her hand. "You saved me, Eliza." Again. "Why did he do it?" Eliza asked, sitting on the edge of the coffee table. "Martin. He had everything." "Greed is a hole with no bottom," Johnny said, staring at the ceiling. "And jealousy. Martin always wanted the chair. He didn't want to serve. He wanted to rule. But he doesn't understand that the crown is heavy. He thinks it's just power. He doesn't see the burden." "He framed you," Eliza said quietly. She picked up a remote and turned on the wall-mounted TV. Every channel was the same. Breaking news. Manhunt underway. Johnny's face was plastered on the screen, next to words like racketeering, murder, and domestic terrorism. And there, in a smaller box, was a grainy photo of Eliza from her university ID. Accomplice, Eliza Rossi. "They're saying we funneled money to extremist groups," Eliza said, her voice hollow. They froze everything. My accounts, your accounts. We have nothing, Johnny. We are ghosts. Johnny watched the news report, his expression unreadable. Martin is thorough. He's using the Argent Solutions ledger, the one you found, and pinning it on me. He's scrubbing his name and leaving mine on the documents. So we run? Eliza asked. We disappear? Johnny looked at her. The predator was back in his eyes. The pain was there, but the fire was hotter. No, he said. We don't run. We are dead broke, injured, and hunted, which means we have exactly one advantage. What's that? We have nothing left to lose. Johnny tried to sit up again, gritting his teeth. Help me to the desk. I have a secure terminal in the study. If Martin wants a war, I'm going to show him what a scorched earth policy really looks like. The study of the safe house was cold. The heating system was malfunctioning, and Eliza could see her breath in the air. She wore one of Johnny's oversized cashmere sweaters, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. For the last 48 hours, the room had become a war room. Johnny lay on a chaise lounge he had dragged next to the desk, too weak to sit upright for long periods, but barking orders and recalling passcodes from memory. Silas patrolled the outside, occasionally bringing in protein bars and coffee. Eliza sat at the triple monitor setup, her fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. The sound of her typing was like a machine gun. He's locked us out of the primary servers, Eliza said, rubbing her tired eyes. The encryption has been cycled. Martin changed the keys at 4 a.m. He's anticipating a counterattack, Johnny said, sipping water. He knows I have back doors. He's closing them one by one. He's not just closing them, Eliza corrected, analyzing the stream of data. He's liquidating. Look at this. She pulled up a real-time stock ticker for a shell company based in Singapore. He's dumping the assets, Eliza explained. He's selling the shipping lines, the real estate portfolio, the tech holdings. He's turning the empire into cash. Fast. He's going to run, Johnny realized. He's going to take the liquidity and disappear to a non-extradition country. Brazil, maybe. Or Dubai. If he cashes out, we can't touch him, Eliza said. Once that money hits the decentralized crypto exchanges he's setting up, it's gone. And so is our evidence of his guilt. Johnny closed his eyes. How long do we have? Based on the transaction speed, 6 hours. Maybe less. Silence filled the room. Johnny looked defeated. His physical strength was gone, and now his legacy was being dismantled piece by piece. Eliza looked at the man she had fallen for, not the Mafia boss, but the brilliant, broken man lying on the chaise. She looked at the numbers on the screen. The logic of the system. A memory from her Wharton days surfaced. A lecture on game theory and asymmetric warfare. Johnny, she said slowly, we can't stop him from selling. We don't have the administrative privileges to halt the trades. So it's over. No, Eliza turned to him, a dangerous smile spreading across her face. It was a smile she had learned from him. We can't stop the sale, but we can poison the well. Johnny opened his eyes. Explain. Martin is selling these assets to private equity groups and hedge funds, right? He's rushing the sales, bypassing due diligence because the prices are so low. It's a fire sale. Correct. I still have access to the valuation servers, not the transaction layer, but the data layer, the reports that tell the buyers what the companies are worth. Eliza turned back to the keyboard. I can't stop him from selling, but I can change the data so that what he's selling looks toxic. I can inject digital debt. I can falsify pending lawsuits. I can make a profitable shipping company look like it's under investigation for nuclear proliferation. Johnny stared at her, awe dawning on his face. You want to tank the value of my own company? If I do this, the stock price crashes to zero in minutes. The buyers will pull out. The algorithms will auto-freeze the assets due to volatility. Martin won't be able to get a dime out. The money gets stuck in escrow. You'd be burning $1 billion to save it, Johnny whispered. It's not burning it, Eliza said, her eyes flashing. It's freezing it. Once the assets are frozen by the SEC and the international banks because of the panic I create, Martin can't run. He'll be stuck in New York with no cash, trying to explain why his portfolio just imploded. Johnny pulled himself up, wincing. He looked at Eliza with a mixture of pride and intense attraction. Do it! Burn it all down! Eliza cracked her knuckles. With pleasure. She began to code. She wrote a script that injected false liabilities into the balance sheets of the shell companies. She backdated fake lawsuits. She created a phantom whistleblower report and uploaded it to the server that the buyer's algorithms scraped for data. Executing in 3, 2, 1. She hit enter. They watched the screens. For a minute, nothing happened. Then, chaos. On the third monitor, the news ticker flashed red. Flash crash. Thorn Capital subsidiaries plummet. The graph that represented Martin's cash-out strategy turned into a vertical line straight down. Look at the volume, Eliza shouted. Everyone is selling. No one is buying. He's trapped. Johnny grinned, his teeth bloody. The automated clearing houses just locked the accounts. He can't move a cent. Eliza's phone, a burner Johnny had given her, buzzed. She looked at it. A text message. Unknown number. Clever girl. Eliza went cold. He knows. He knows it was you. He knows where we are, Eliza whispered, horror washing over her victory. Johnny, look at the text. She held up the phone. It wasn't just text. It was a picture. It was a photo of the front gate of their safe house, taken from the tree line. Crack. The sound of a high-powered rifle shot shattered the silence of the woods. Down at the gate, through the window, they saw Silas crumple to the ground. Silas! Johnny roared, trying to stand but collapsing back onto the chaise. They're here! Eliza screamed, scrambling away from the window as a bullet shattered the glass, embedding itself in the monitor she had just been using. Get down! Johnny shouted, crawling toward the desk where he kept a backup pistol taped underneath. The lights in the house cut out. Martin hadn't just come to kill them. He had brought a hit squad. Eliza! Listen to me! Johnny hissed in the darkness, checking the magazine of the pistol. There is a tunnel in the basement. It leads to the river. You go. Now. I am not leaving you, Eliza cried, grabbing his arm. I can't run, Johnny snapped. I'll hold them off. You have the evidence on the laptop. If you escape, you can clear our names. If we both die here, Martin wins. No, Eliza sobbed. Suddenly, the front door blew inward with a deafening explosion. Smoke filled the living room. Laser sights cut through the dust, scanning for targets. Go! Johnny shoved her toward the hidden door in the bookshelf. Eliza looked at him one last time. He was bleeding, battered, holding a single pistol against an army. He looked like a fallen king making his last stand. She didn't want to go. She wanted to die with him. But she knew he was right. She grabbed the hard drive containing the poison pill data and the evidence of Martin's theft. With tears streaming down her face, Eliza Rossi slipped into the darkness of the tunnel, leaving the man she loved to face the devil alone. Behind her, the gunfire erupted. The water of the Delaware River was black and freezing, a liquid void that tried to pull Eliza down into its depths. She gasped for air, her lungs burning, her limbs numb from the cold. The current was strong, dragging her downstream, away from the burning safe house on the cliff above. She could still hear the gunfire, The pop, pop, pop of pistols, the deeper boom of the rifle. And then silence. That silence was worse than the noise. It meant the battle was over. It meant Johnny was gone. Eliza washed up on a muddy bank a mile downriver. She crawled onto the silt, retching water, shivering violently. She was covered in mud, her expensive dress ruined, her feet bare and bleeding. She clutched the waterproof hard drive to her chest like a newborn child. It was the only thing she had left. It was the only thing that mattered. She stumbled through the woods for hours until she found a highway. A trucker stopped for her, a kind, older man who asked no questions, likely thinking she was a victim of a domestic dispute. He drove her into the city. She didn't go to the police. She didn't go to a hospital. She went to the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, D.C. It was 4 a.m. when she walked into the lobby of the FBI headquarters. She looked like a revenant, mud-streaked, wild-eyed, smelling of swamp water and blood. The security guard at the desk reached for his radio. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "My name is Eliza Rossi," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. "I am the CFO of Thorn Capital. I have evidence of international money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit murder against Martin Vane." The guard paused. "And," she added, her eyes hardening into diamonds, "I will only speak to Assistant Director Miller. No one else." 2 hours later, Eliza sat in a sterile interrogation room. She was wrapped in a grey wool blanket, sipping lukewarm tea. Across the metal table sat Assistant Director Miller, a woman with a face carved from granite. "You're a hard woman to find, Ms. Rossi," Miller said, opening a file. "We've had a warrant out for you and Johnny Thorn for 48 hours. We found the safe house in the Catskills, burned to the ground." Eliza's heart stopped. She gripped the cup tighter. "And the bodies?" "We found 3 mercenaries, Russian nationals, dead." Miller paused, watching Eliza carefully. "And we found a bodyguard, Silas. He's in critical condition, but he'll live." "And Johnny," Eliza whispered, the name catching in her throat. Miller closed the file. "No sign of Johnny Thorn. There was a lot of blood, Ms. Rossi, but no body." A spark of hope, hot and painful, ignited in Eliza's chest. If there was no body, there was a chance. A slim, fragile chance. "I want to make a deal," Eliza said, her voice strengthening. Miller raised an eyebrow. "You're in no position to bargain. You're an accessory to a criminal enterprise." "I'm not an accessory," Eliza said. She reached into her blanket and pulled out the hard drive. She slid it across the table. "I'm the whistleblower." Miller looked at the drive, then back at Eliza. "On that drive," Eliza said, "is the entire history of Project Hydra. Every bribe Martin Vane paid, every judge he bought. But more importantly, it contains the metadata I injected into the server before we fled. It proves that Martin Vane was the architect of the illegal trades, and that he framed Johnny Thorn using a stolen identity key." "And what do you want?" Miller asked, her hand hovering over the drive. "I want total immunity," Eliza said. "For me?" Miller nodded slowly. "Given the value of this intel, that's possible. And," Eliza leaned forward, "I want immunity for Johnny Thorn, witness protection, a clean slate." Miller laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Thorn is the king of New York. We don't give immunity to the Don." "Johnny isn't the Don anymore," Eliza said fiercely. "Martin took the crown. Johnny is just a man who was shot trying to protect a witness. Me. If you want Martin Vane, if you really want to take down the corruption in this city, you need Johnny to testify. And you need this drive." Miller stared at her. "You really love him, don't you? The monster." "He's not a monster," Eliza said, tears finally spilling over. "He's just a bad investment that I'm going to fix." Miller picked up the drive. "I'll run it up the chain. But Ms. Rossi, Martin Vane is currently holding a press conference in New York. He's spinning a narrative that Johnny was the villain and he is the savior stepping in to rescue the company. He's winning." Eliza wiped her tears. She stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders. Underneath the grime, she was the actuary of the underworld. "He thinks he's winning," Eliza said coldly. "But he forgot one thing. He forgot to check the math." 2 weeks later, the boardroom of Thorn Capital was silent as Martin Vane stood at the head of the mahogany table. He looked every bit the grieving successor, his suit impeccable, his expression somber. Johnny's descent into madness was a tragedy, Martin told the nervous board members. "But we must survive. I move to confirm my appointment as CEO and approve the immediate sale of our logistics division." "I object." The double door swung open. Eliza Rossi stood there, flanked by federal agents. She wore a tailored white suit that looked like armor, holding a briefcase like a weapon. "Security!" Martin barked, his composure cracking. "Remove this fugitive." "I'm not a fugitive, Martin," Eliza said, slamming a file onto the table. "I'm the court-appointed executor of the frozen assets. I traded the Project Hydra files for immunity. My record is clean, unlike yours." She pressed a remote. The wall screen flickered to life, showing the grainy security footage from the safe house. Martin shooting Silas, Martin ordering the kill. The board members gasped. "Deep fake!" Martin screamed, backing away. "She's lying! Johnny is dead! I saw the house burn!" "Did you check for a body?" A low, raspy voice came from the doorway. Martin froze. The blood drained from his face. Johnny Thorn walked in. He leaned heavily on a cane, a bandage visible beneath his collar, but his eyes were burning with cold blue fire. He didn't look like a ghost. He looked like Judgment Day. "Hello, Martin," Johnny said, limping to the head of the table. "You're sitting in my chair." "Impossible," Martin whispered, stumbling back into the waiting arms of the FBI agents. "You're fired," Johnny said calmly, "and you're under arrest." As Martin was dragged out, screaming obscenities, the room cleared, leaving only the king and his queen. The silence was heavy with everything left unsaid. Johnny limped toward her, stopping a breath away. He reached out, his rough hand cupping her cheek. "Miller told me what you did. You walked into the FBI with a target on your back to get me immunity. You traded the Empire's secrets for my life." "I told you," Eliza whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I had to balance the books." "So I'm not a Don anymore," Johnny murmured, resting his forehead against hers. "Just a businessman with a bad leg and a brilliant CFO." "Is that a job offer?" She smiled. "It's a lifetime appointment," he promised, and kissed her, a kiss that tasted of victory and second chances. 6 months later, Johnny and Eliza stood on the balcony of a penthouse in Paris, the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance. Thorn and Rossi Global was now the world's leading legitimate ethics consulting firm. The underworld was a memory. The danger was gone. "Are you happy?" Johnny asked, swirling his wine. Eliza looked at the city, then at the ring on her finger. "I miss the tips," she joked. Johnny laughed, pulling her close. "I'll give you a tip. Bet on us. The odds are perfect." And that is how a waitress with a genius mind took down a criminal empire and stole the heart of the King of New York. From pouring whiskey to poring over balance sheets, Eliza Rossi proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's the truth. If you enjoyed this story of danger, betrayal, and redemption, please destroy that like button. It helps the channel immensely. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. What did you think of Eliza's gambit at the end? Would you have gone back for Johnny, or taken the money and run? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.